Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Cyber Monday show. We have an absolutely excellent episode in for today. Thank you very much for joining, and we're going to get started right after this. Alrighty, and so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our awesome co-host, Makeshift. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Oh man, we are rolling. The Chiefs play today, and our guest is a diehard Seahawks fan, so he understands the pain. And if anybody has been following along on Twitter, you guys might know who I'm talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Andrew Chanthaphone.
Hey guys, hi everybody.
What is up? How are you doing?
Oh man, I'm excited to be here. I mean, yes, Seahawks did win last night. I mean, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, if we struggled to win that game, I might have not been sober for this interview. So I'm excited. So yes, excited. Chiefs. Hopefully they'll win tonight and get things fixed up for you guys, make you happy, man. You know, but both our teams are a mess. But I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Man, I'll tell you what, I feel the same way about the Chiefs playing the Giants tonight. If the Chiefs don't blow them out of the water 50-0 on prime time in Arrowhead, yeah, this is going to be just a tougher, like a worse week than it should be. Like, it's great already, but anyway. So, dude, thank you so much for jumping on. I feel like there's so much to talk about here. I mean, you got like a YouTube channel. You've been very involved on Twitter, which has been fantastic. For people that have not met you yet, do you mind just kind of running through your background and talking a little bit about your channel?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everybody. I'm Andrew. So, I am a IAM or Identity Access Management business analyst / project manager. I'm more of a person that does professional services. So, I go into organizations. I help them migrate from their old system to a newer IAM system, requirements, best practices, the whole 9 yards from there. So I started a YouTube channel called All Things IAM because in our industry or in the IAM space, we're not like the most sexiest name, right? To be very fair to everybody. Everybody's like, oh yeah, ethical hacking, cool, I'm doing pen testing, that's awesome. GRC is getting up there too. But IAM doesn't get a fair shot, right? So I thought, you know what? We need people. It's a huge thing. Let me bring a channel to kind of get more awareness, right? And to get people who want to transition into IAM, that you can do it. You don't have to be so like technical from there, because I started off my career not very technical. I was a tester earlier in my career. I evolved to more of a business analyst. And for those who don't know who that is, we're just people who talk to customers, understand their requirements, but it's not just requirements, right? Understand pain points, problems, do process diagrams, see how things flow. And then I evolved to cybersecurity. I got lucky. So I fell into a job where it's like, hey, we have this thing called SailPoint. Go and learn it. I'm like, what's SailPoint? I have no idea what that was. Like, here's some YouTube. Here's some videos. I'm like, okay, here's a user guide. I fell in love with it, and I met a bunch of guys on a project who just taught me everything IAM, and then it's been full speed ahead. I fell into cybersecurity from there, and I came from a financial background. So, I mean, I went to school for CIS or computer information systems, more of a business term rather than like CS. But all the products I've worked on is more government financial systems. So coming to cybersecurity, brand new, right? And again, these guys gave me their time of day, taught me everything, asked me the why. Why are we asking this question? Or how do you do it this way? Or here's why we secure this, or here's why we ask these questions. And then from that point on, it's just been, I've been on projects learning more, understanding how best practices go in terms of IAM. And then it's where I am today. And I thought, you know what? Let me teach people what I've learned in my career to help more people to say, you know what, if you don't want to, if you're concerned that, oh man, do I need to learn all this like script, Python, whatever, and you think you feel overwhelmed, then IAM might be a space for you to come in and learn that, where you learn more framework, best practices, and just help customers understand that IAM is so big. It's not just like one small thing. And for those people who do pen testing or any kind of other like ethical hacking, identity is in the center, right? And everything revolves around that. So that's what my channel is really for, is to help that. And one last part before I shut up and let you guys talk more is I want to help with career advice. Also, I've jumped around jobs a lot. I've been in a lot of interviews. So I'm trying to help out people who maybe aren't good at interviewing, or how do I sell myself, right, to hiring managers from an IAM perspective and see how they can get jobs from there, even entry level. So that's me in a nutshell.
Dude, that is so cool. I mean, and you're exactly right that it really all does kind of revolve rather around IAM. Like, I mean, offense and defense, a lot of it kind of comes down to either a misconfiguration or really just keeping up with those configurations and having, that good practice long term, for sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, so we have some entry level, college kids that we just hired recently. And one of them asked me today, they're like, what are some common breaches? Like what happens? I'm like, oh, phishing, that's easy. But then I was like, sometimes we have accounts that just have too much privileges. And once they get into the accounts, they'll figure it out. And maybe they can use that to say, oh, you know what? This person has admin rights. Why should they? Or it's we don't rotate passwords, right? So we have server admins, or I think the Colonial Pipe Hack was a good example of they had a reusable password, never changed, and they used it. I was like, oh man, this is an admin rights. Let me go to town on this, right? So I explained to her how IAM fits into like how breaches from occur. That most times hackers look first is how can I get access to username password, get access there. And if I don't, then you have your misconfigurations you talked about. I don't patch a server, from there. So common ways where breaches occur, but most people start identity first.
Yeah, that's totally right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so much we could dive into that, but before we, dive into anything in particular, do you have anything real quick?
No, I mean, that's definitely, I mean, even stuff, because I do primarily blue team stuff, during the day, and I study the hacking stuff at night. But yeah, I mean, just like you were saying, I mean, it's phishing emails are a big, starting point, and especially from like the hacking, it's like, yeah, it's like, if you haven't changed your password, which we could go down a whole other wormhole with passwords, because I know NIST has a thing now where they're saying like you don't have to, change out your passwords every, like 90 days or whatever, I think was the default before that. But and I agree to that to a certain extent, but I know even with certain companies, like they will have a specific program, whatever, like rotate the passwords for them. So it's like you don't even have to memorize the password; it will do that for you. And so that I mean, that's every 30 days. So it makes it even harder to have a hacker or whatever come in and crack your password.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so right. And well, isn't it like 75% of like ransomware events are spun up by phishing, or is that the best?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Just exactly what Makeshift said. In terms of that, where you have these privileged access management solutions, right, that are supposed to do that for you. Where you have a automatic rotating passwords. I even explained to her the student, the entry levels that was working with us. I was like, these PAM products have stuff where, again, rotate passwords. You may check out a password temporarily, and that's something that given to, let's say, Makeshift will come in and say, hey, I need access to this database, right? And I'm an admin. I can check that out temporarily for a minute, say a couple hours, and I check it back in. If for some reason that password gets lost or somebody gets it from somewhere, the system can say, wait, Makeshift already has this password. No, I'm not going to let them access. And Itara in the back end, the real password is maybe used from the PAM product, and it's shooting that password out to the server itself, but it's giving you a temporary or a makeup password that only that PAM product knows. And so then if it does get out lost in the dark web or forever, it's not going to be accessed in, because the system will know, wait a minute, this has already been checked out. This is not right. Alert, red flags, go, contact people and say, hey, you know what? Something's going wrong here. Let's go and rotate everybody's password right now, and then they can use it there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's also just to kind of emphasize, well, yeah, to emphasize, but also kind of illustrate how why this can be a struggle, is that for people that aren't necessarily in like the IT space or in cybersecurity, this is like one of the biggest headache points, or sources of a headache is like, why do they have to constantly be changing their password? And especially if, you're working with an organization that like the cybersecurity maturity level is not that progressed, then like something like a password manager may not have been, in place yet. And so, you're asking them to rotate passwords at really a pretty aggressive rate, especially if you're asking them to use like a 2025 character password and they don't really know where to store that yet. And so I think that's where a big, like, I guess point of friction exists, between your cybersecurity teams and your IT teams. What have your guys' experience been with that? How have you guys been able to resolve that if you have experienced that?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go?
I'll go. So
Please do.
I know it's always like a who won, like rock, paper, scissors. No, as far as passwords go, I mean, yeah, when I worked in help desk, obviously before all this, and we had a policy of every 90 days you change out your password. And obviously, somebody from an IT perspective knows you can't or you shouldn't have every single account have the same password. So we, towards the end of me working there, implemented a password manager. But before all that, it was like, well, you want them all to have, you might have 5 different accounts that have different usernames that you have to memorize one, and then they all are supposed to have different passwords. And if I got to rotate these out every 90 days, I'm going to make them as simple as possible so that I have to memorize them. Because obviously, when I was in help desk, we were constantly going over to other people's computers to help them out with stuff. If we saw that, okay, well, now I know what your password is. So now we have to go back into the system and change it. So it's like they would make them very easy. And from somebody who has done password cracking just on my own accord on TryHackMe and everything, it's not hard to crack a password that is spring 2021 ! With a capital S. Like, even if you had, like, because we used to have criteria, they were like, okay, well, it's got to be at least 10 characters long, and it's got to have uppercase, lowercase, number, special character. But yeah, it's like, well, when it's something like that, it's like, well, that's not complex. Like, one of the first things that we're going to go for if we're trying to crack your password is these simple ones, And so that's when I was really excited when they started implementing the password manager, because it's like, okay, even though it's, somebody could argue, and I know a lot of people are against it, is like it being the single point of failure. But it's like, if you come up with like, and I'll use this example because I use this myself, is LastPass. If I come up with one complex password for that particular, as the master password for the vault, the rest of them can be generated, and you can even go in there and specify like, oh, I want this 30 characters long. I want every possible character, including emojis, in on this thing to make it as complex as possible for somebody to try to break into it. And I really do think that even a lot of companies need to start, not only implementing that, but also making their passwords longer as a default, because 10 characters isn't long enough. Like, I honestly think that your minimum should be like 16.
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, it just, so like, obviously, I use LastPass too, right? There's so many other ones. I think the struggle for companies, especially government. So I came from a government contracting, before I started to do what I do now, which is more commercial work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to get the government to buy things, right? Everybody knows they're always like behind on everything. So it's tough, right? And the funny thing was, when I would call help desk and I would give them, that's typically my password, right? It's what's the seasons? Oh, summer. So it's $, summer 2021, bang, bang. I'm like, if you don't know, bang, bang is 2 exclamation marks. That's, so I should probably give out somebody's password. Change it. I think that's also, I mean, I agree with you, right? In terms of password managers are great. I use it. I make my wife use it all the time. But her struggle is, what about work? Like, where do I store my passwords, right? And because you have people with like this, like I have a sticky note right here. That's not my password, but when I used to work in an office, I have people all the time like, what's that, dude? Oh, that's my password. Why'd you put it right there, bro? That's so stupid. Or they make it very simple because people have hard times to remember things. So when I made my, I think I made my password one, even the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which just passed, if people have a hard time using random characters, make it a phrase. You know, phrases are something that you can remember it. It's still hard. Don't get me wrong. Like it's not as easy as people think it is. And it makes much more sense, right? And I know that's something where I struggle with too, because going back to what Studio said about what's the good effort between user easiness of users, but then also make it complex, right? From that's the hard part too, is what's the balance, right? And that's always been my struggle. How do I make it secure enough that we can meet SOX compliance, but then make it not so hard for end users to be like, man, I don't want to do this. This is too damn hard. Screw it. I'll do something else. Or people will find ways to do workarounds if you make it too hard for them. So it's always been my struggle, is to make it balanced enough, So that's just my opinion. I agree. Some password managers should be there and help us, even for when I've been, make it a little bit more harder. That's probably the easiest way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we have a question here from Mighty Mischief. How do you go about discussing implementing a password manager to leadership when they don't understand how vendors secure master passwords?
So I think in my opinion, right, the best way to do that is when we talk to leadership, I would tell them the value, right? I would show them two sides of the coin. What's the doom and gloom? Like what should happen, right? Obviously, I get breached. Then I'm on the front of a newspaper, right? I use that analogy all the time when I talk to customers. Is, hey, how much does it cost for you to implement this enterprise-wide and communicate that versus you being on the front page? So I live in Virginia, right? So Washington Post, all these bigger examples. I would rather not be on the front cover of Washington Post saying I got breached. Costs a lot of money, lawyers paying off, people paying off, like giving people access to credit scores, whatever, which everybody gets anyway. All these different things, it costs money, right? It costs a lot more. Microsoft has they do like every year a report, right, of the amount of money it costs companies. It's in the hundreds of millions. So versus rolling out a enterprise like LastPass, for example, I bet they have discounted rates, right, for that. So to answer, Mighty Mischief's question is, I present the value. Like, here's a problem that this has today. Here's the value add about how this will save our life or save our job or make things better and secure. And then here's the cost that it might save us, right? I think once you kind of say that to an organization saying, hey, it might save us money, they're like, oh, really? And lower risk, tell me more, right? I think that's how I would present it to leadership in terms of a password manager or some form of a password manager rolling out enterprise-wide. And maybe you suggest, let's do a pod group, right? Let's do like one department. Let's test it out. Let me show you how it works. And then you build upon there once you get there, saying, you know what, it's working here. Let's get some feedback from this group, and then let's move on from there. So that's how I would do it, at least, to answer that question.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm totally with you. And even for just thinking about like a smaller organization, there are so many small businesses out there that don't really, they don't believe that they can afford cybersecurity assistance, right? And they don't, it might, like something like a password manager might seem too expensive for them to be able to adopt and implement. But you can get these for pretty darn cheap. And implement them for a very low cost. And so I think a lot of that comes down to just user awareness and making or communicating that to leadership and letting them know that, this doesn't have to be an expensive solution. You don't have to go, to like the big marketed products out there. You can get this implemented for your organization at a pretty low rate, as long as you're, looking in all the right places and you have the right, people around you.
I want to take a second, and I don't know if you want to pop this up on the screen so everybody can see, but I know Parker posted a couple good questions here. The first one, is in a real world context, how do you get employees to accept password managers or password complexity requirements? It's and it depends on certain programs, because I know like we had used an IBM system before, like an old AS400 type system, where your password complexity wasn't there yet. And I don't know if it was just because they haven't quite moved forward in, cybersecurity type awareness stuff. But theirs were 10 characters, and there were no such thing as uppercase. And it was just alphanumeric characters. That was it. But for other things, you can actually have policies in place to where if they enter in anything under 16 characters, it doesn't go through. If they don't have a special character, it doesn't go through. A lot of websites have implemented that, where it's like, you know, they'll have like little checks underneath where you're typing your password in the text field, and it will, the minute it recognizes that you've typed in a particular character, it'll hit that little check mark. And the other question that he had was, you know, your password manager is only as strong as your master password. How do you use a strong password to secure your manager that doesn't another manager use to restore it? In order to answer that one, it's easier for people to memorize one really complex password as opposed to, you know, like if you were to look into my vault, I've got 100 different websites that I've got storing passwords for me. If I had to sit back and try to remember 100 different websites, none of them are going to be complex. They're going to be very, very simple because I have to memorize them all. And they're probably all going to be the same. So having a password manager and only having to remember one password, it helps influence people to be more secure on the web, you know, and whatever. So I thought those were really, really good. I kind of want your guys' opinions on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, so in my opinion, right, to answer Parker's question from the first one. So I know sometimes there are limitations, right? We have Active Directory, for example, right? Some Active Directory, when you do password management through them, you're limited on characters, right? So sometimes what I've done too is I've suggested, can we put something in front of that, right? To kind of do that. So for example, and this kind of answers the second question, is throwing a two-factor authentication in there, right? Prior. So a good example, and I said this in one of my videos, right? And it's a true story, is we have the big problem is homegrown applications, right? Who a organization builds it from the ground up. Some developer, great idea, say, you know what, I'm gonna build it from the ground up. The problem is the authentication is done through a database, right? So you're limited. And maybe you can't do like an API call to do a two-factor authentication. So maybe you can say, you know what, let's say RSA or like Okta, for example, throw it in front of it, and you two-factor authenticate there, and then you log into your password there, right? So you're still adding that additional layer of security, you know? So, you know, you get that secureness from there. So that also is why I think when it comes to password managers in terms of remembering your master password is you can put it in two-factor. I know, for example, LastPass, you use like your YubiKey, for example, and they have like Duo and other ones. Throw that in front of it, right? So whenever I do my master password, I have to always put that physical token in or use my software authenticator like YubiKey. I mean, not YubiKey, so like Authy, for example, right? And use that to you know, save it there, and that'll be one way too. So that's a nice way of having it too. So you kind of, you know, do that. And then one more thing about Parker is, again, going back to using use small groups, right? I know your question was, how do I get more buy-in from my end users saying, hey, you know what, we're trying to up you from 10 to 16. Do a subset, get feedback, right? I think that's one thing about IAM I think people don't understand too, is us using feedback from our end users saying, hey, let me roll it out to a small set of group of people, see how that works, and then that will help you shape your communication to your other enterprise people saying, maybe here's how we roll it out, or maybe we pare back a little bit. And once we get people more and more and more accustomed to doing it, I think that's where the buy-in comes in play in terms of that. What do you think about that, Studio?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally, you know, I'm all aboard. And this actually ties into something that the Cyber Mentor and I were talking about in our interview there. Check it out if you have it. But anyway, he kind of mentioned, you know, cybersecurity advocacy groups, and kind of to your point, rolling it out to a small like subset of people that may be more willing to adopt it, and even, you know, have some folks that might be a little more resistant, just to show them that it's really pretty easy. A lot of this stuff is pretty easy. It sounds hard in like our heads, but whenever you actually implement it, it's easy. And so having like those advocates just scattered throughout the organization, they will be able to, in their, you know, sphere of influence, you know, kind of project to other people, hey, don't worry, this is actually super easy. I was able to do it myself, so you definitely can too. And that, I mean, just your point, like that totally makes communication on it easy. You know, internal, you know, company politics can be kind of, you got to be careful, especially in security, because you need you need buy-in. You can't afford for there to not be buy-in. And so I think that's a good one. And then, to kind of, last thing to hit on Makeshift's point on policy, the written policy is super important, but like you said, you need that, an ability to verify that a passphrase that someone's putting in is actually meeting policy requirements. A policy is completely toothless if you lack an enforcement mechanism. And, you might have a small organization that may not have the technical capability to create or to have an enforcement mechanism at the time. And so that's whenever you're trying to roll out, this policy adjustment, you're not only building out the policy and you're communicating these things, you're building out the technology, or you're finding a way to adopt this technology to be able to have that enforcement mechanism. And then what happens if you have employees that do push back? What's the company handling on that? So it really is, it can be a pretty large undertaking with a very cooperative user base. It can go pretty smoothly, but there are definitely cases out there where it just isn't. I'm sure you guys have seen and maybe even experienced cases where, you have folks that are like, well, this is how we've always done it. And Eric Bellardo posted, but my browser has a password manager. Why do I need another? And that's like a real thing.
No.
Yeah, that can be a real thing. A lot of people don't realize that that's totally insecure. And they're like, but doesn't this functionally do the same thing? Well, it stores your passwords, but it certainly isn't secure. And the whole point of a password manager is it's secure. And
yeah. No, I'm sorry, CEO. Yeah, and also just for people who think in terms of browsers, you're limited to that browser, right? Which sucks. So think about it. Like if for example, I use Brave as one of my browsers. If I use their password manager, if I'm in, let's say on my phone using Firefox, I can't access those passwords, right? I'm in trouble. So that's like the one big con that that happens in terms of browsers, right? And then, in terms of going back to what you said, Studio, about communication, that's something that Eric, you guys talked about a while back, right? Was, hey, how do I, what's one of the big things into InfoSec? Communication, right there, spot on. Eric talked about it in his interview a couple weeks ago. I remember that too. It's huge that you need to be able to communicate your message to the broad audience and to dumb it down, right? And I'm not insulting anybody. You'd be surprised how many people have zero idea what you're talking about. What is authentication? What's a password manager? What is AD? Like all this stuff. Like if you can communicate that in a simple way and let other people understand that, you're gonna get champions. Like you said, word of mouth spreads fast. The more and more you kind of help people understand that and make simple analogies about how this will make their life more secure and the company more secure, you'll get more people to buy in, and it makes your messaging so much easier, than having to do so much more work. Because again, communication across to other people has always been a struggle too for all of us. I mean, I face it all the time. So it's definitely something where if you are good at talking to people and conveying your message in an easier way, consuming password or in a more consumption, it makes your life 90% easier.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious how your experience starting a YouTube channel has kind of helped you work on communication. I know with me, it's in some ways it's again, you're not really talking to somebody. There's no replacement for just human to human interaction. But especially whenever you're trying to explain, concepts like cybersecurity concepts, maybe to a target audience that might not have the same background, you do kind of have to, as you say, dumb it down. I like to say, there's nerd speak, like, people, you're talking to other cybersecurity people, like you both have the vocabulary, and then there's like just speaking in human language, like folks that don't have necessarily the vocabulary. And so how is having a YouTube channel, and maybe for you, being in a Discord and being involved, with interacting with a lot of people, how has it helped your communication at work, being able to communicate with people that may not have the same vocabulary to actually accomplish these goals?
Big, you want to go first?
No, I'm gonna let you go first this
Oh,
time.
okay, cool, man. All right, I'm being cordial, man. It's your channel. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
So being a business analyst, right, a PM, right, my job is I always have to talk to people, right? CEOs, people who have zero idea what I'm doing. Especially when I ask for money, it's like, I need this. I need to convey to them, or I only have 10 minutes of their time to convey to them the need. Why do I need this money, right? So I think over my years of being a business analyst and talking to CEOs and project managers who have zero idea, it's helped me along the way to teach or just use different analogies, right? So for example, customers like, oh, I want all the bells and whistles. So I'm like, so you want a Lamborghini that does everything from the start? What if your customers hate it and let's test drive using a Honda first, make sure that works, and then we'll add the bells and whistles like that. And then I replace the features that they want with those bells and whistles, right? Like, oh, you know what, cruise control is cool, but what if your end users don't know how to use it or they hate it, right? So that's I think that's where I came from, and in my channel, that's really what I do, right? Is I did a nonprofit a long time, a nonprofit IAM 101, and my audience were people were thinking about IAM and want to transition, right? So obviously that's how and I talked to some of them afterwards and like, I'd love to learn more about IAM. I know right there of the fact I can't go and start busting out stuff like two-factor authentication, using acronyms for them. They'll have no idea what's going on. And I might lose them, but I don't want to lose them. These could be some great people that will come into IAM and do great things, right? So in my channel, I talk to people as if they have zero idea what's going on, right? I try my best to keep it simple. I use examples a lot in my videos, and the whole point of the example is to say, maybe I can understand this from a different way. So like, for example, biometrics, I use people who have iPhones all the time, or any phone, right? So smartphone, Androids, whatever, a lot of them have Face ID or whatever. I use that as an analogy, right? To help them go, oh, I get it. Okay, cool. That's how I talk to my audience in the videos. Is I try to keep it very, very simple, something that they can digest. They can actually think about what they do in their job and say, how do I talk about what RBAC is, or role-based access control, right, in my job, and what does that really mean, right? Which is my next video is about RBAC. But to talk about that and help them say, okay, here's how I would consume it, and here's how I can talk to somebody else about it and make sure that they get it. Because I know that's one thing. Because if I talk to my neighbor, if I say RBAC, she'll look at me like, what is that a new dance, new trend on TikTok? Like, no, it's not actually. So I think that's how I talk to my audience. What about you, Make, in terms of that and Discord?
So I mean, and maybe the Discord is a little bit different because we do get a lot of technical people that come in there. But we do have people that come in that are just like, I don't know much about cybersecurity. I just think hacking seems kind of cool. And Eric, I swear. Oh man. But no, I mean, we do have some people that come in that are just like, I really think hacking is cool. I want to learn how to do it. Can you guys show me? And you're immediately, you're assuming, you're like, okay, well, you say hacking, you're probably seeing movies like Hackers or, whatever. And you don't really know some of the terminology that comes with hacking. Like if I start throwing out Metasploit, you're going to have no idea what that means. If I start throwing out just any of these other terms, you're going to be like, ugh. I've always considered myself to be very good at taking very complex, high-level terms that are technical and bringing them down to an easier understanding and make it more digestible for people. And I think a really good thing that you had pointed out was like having like situations and making it apply to how they would, use it. If you're using, using a two-factor authentication or, biometrics or whatever like that, and they're going, huh? And then you go, okay, well, how your phone has a little thumbprint reader or it'll recognize your face. And then they're like, oh yeah. It's stuff like that. It's, you almost try to make cybersecurity seem kind of exciting in a way, which I know sometimes is really hard to do, but for people that don't understand it, that you want to get them to, you definitely have to kind of use less technical terms and try to explain it and elaborate more in it so that they understand it. Because I've had some times where I've talked to some people and I've not caught myself. I've started speaking in very technical terms and I just noticed this glossiness over their eyes. And I'm just like, I'm losing you, aren't I? And they go, yep. Like you lost me an hour ago. So it's, yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of us really have to work better at doing, is explaining to people, why cybersecurity is important, why these very fundamental concepts that they can do even at home are very important to protecting themselves overall.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think not acronyms. Acronyms make it worse. Analogies. I found analogies to be just such a huge asset. If you're able to actually, use analogies that are relatable to whoever you're talking to, you can make like an otherwise like complicated concept like get picked up pretty quick because you're relating it to something that they know. Parker has been rolling with the excellent questions. And by the way, everybody, if you're watching and you have a question, pop it in the chat. We would love to talk about it. But Parker here is talking about Active Directory and how secure Active Directory is when deployed within a large company. Basically, should Active Directory do more to actively implement better security practices? I'll let you guys really attack this one. I feel like personally on my end, it's really up to whoever's running AD. AD's really as good as you let it let it go. But I'll let you guys go on that one.
I'll let you go first this time, man.
I don't have a whole lot of I guess experience with implementing better security practices within AD. From a lot of people that I've talked to, and maybe the people that I talked to have had very little experience as far as securing it, but it just seems like AD's kind of not as secure as it could be, and that there's better options out there, but then they're not quite as robust as Active Directory in the same vein. So it's like you might get better security measures with something else, but you're not going to get the functionality that you want, out of them as well. It's like a weird double-edged sword.
Right. I mean, Dorian hit on the spot, right? On his comments, policies, right? It's a lot of times you can add policies to your AD, and this is from my experience, right? And is you can add some additional policies to make AD a little bit more stronger in terms of there. And also, again, what you can do is you can have the way you give access to people that has access to AD, for example, you lock it down, right? Put in a PAM, there, lock it down from there. That's one method. Rotate passwords so you get there. And also, there are some companies that do virtualize or virtual directory services. I don't want to name it, but like Radiant Logic is one that they do it where they take a lot of the Active Directory part and put it into like a more of a virtualized arena, and you can have more secure lockdown there, right? So that's another option too in terms of AD. And going to the cloud, as Parker asked here about the reality of going cloud, is there are some organizations that do hybrid, so you have half, and there's some like Azure AD and AWS has their own sort of Active Directory there. Most of those are, especially from cloud, from what I understand from my studying of cloud stuff, is there are different roles and policy that you can implement to really lock that down. But I know a lot of organizations use AD, and I know it's a struggle for them. I might have to actually ask one of my coworkers who's more of an AD expert to see that, Parker. So I might have to get back to you on that one. But that's just what I believe, in my opinion. But I definitely would reach out to one of my friends who's an AD expert to say, hey, what are some ways other than like policies, for example, for us to really strengthen AD, because it is. To be honest with you, a lot of times, I think that's how Zero Trust was kind of like built out, right? Was, how do I secure the moat, everybody calls it, and make people give least privilege in terms of their access, and then make them re-authenticate themselves or make them assume, hey, I am already breached. What do I need to do, right? To kind of limit that risk, if that makes sense. And then let people know that, hey, single sign-on, it's not always like the best approach, right? Because you might have to really, make them log in, authenticate themselves. Okay, what do you need access to? Right. Okay, here, great. Let me give you that from there too, and then go from there. So that might be other options too, in terms of how to harden, at least limit your access to key areas like AD.
Kind of here on Parker's question, what do you guys think about physical MFA devices, and really is it how practical is it for most organizations? And I use most, let's say, not Fortune 100. And really, let's say outside of Fortune 1000, or maybe that budget's not quite as much there. How can companies that do implement work from home, practices, implement multi-factor authentication? Is our physical device okay? What do you guys think?
Sorry, somebody made fun of Nick's beard, which I can never grow anyway. This is like 2 weeks, by the way. I can't grow none of that. Anyway, I thought I made that joke out there because I can't even grow any of that, so I'm jealous, I think. So physical tokens. So I talked about this in my last video too, is, it can be a struggle because guess what? You lose your MFA stuff, right? And it's not, I guess it's not cheap, right? I know Yubico has like a deal by like 5,000 of them, but if you work for like a big company, let's say like a Booz Allen, for example, right? Where it's like in the tens of 20,000, 30,000 employees, that's a lot, right? Of money. And there's a couple of things, right? Registering, going back to our old conversation, I got to teach people who have zero idea, how do I register, right? That whole communication there is a struggle right there. And to physically give somebody a token and say, don't lose this, right? It can be a struggle where, you're authenticator on your phone, like an Authy, Obsidian, don't use Google, it's not that great. All these other ones, that's nice too, because you can use your phone, you can take a QR code and register it there. And it's easier because everybody has their damn cell phone, right? So, it makes it easier for them to kind of access that, get a one-time code on their phone, say, I'm in, that's a nice option too. And it saves a lot of money, right? And I think what a lot of people don't understand from company-wise is most companies have something like that already, right? They may have a Duo, or they may have a RSA already implemented. Let's use that, right? And Eric, no way should we use email authentication. That is one of the worst ways doing it. I said in my video, do not do that too. Easy to be hackable. I know, I love it. No, he's testing me. I love it. No, he's testing me. I love it. But so if you have abundance of money, for your company and you want to go physical token, have at it. Just know that there's just struggles of registering and talking to people and getting them to buy in, shipping them out to people, and using it. It's great. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the easiest solution. Sometimes you have to look at your company and see what's the best approach. What do you think about that, Mick?
Yeah, I mean, so the company that I work for, they send out cell phones, obviously, because I work fully remote, and that is my multi-factor authentication. Like, that's how I VPN into our corporation's network. That's how I gain access to a bunch of other different things. And it's like, yeah, and I don't have to worry about holding on to a token that's going to be smaller than my cell phone. And I keep my cell phone on me at all times anyway. So it makes things a lot easier. I think, yeah, if you were to hand out a token or whatever, it's like, I don't know, those YubiKeys aren't very big, so you could lose it down the vent of your house. Your dog could eat it, yeah, exactly. Like they're literally, the size of 2 segments of your finger. So it's like and they're thin, so they can literally slip anywhere. You could accidentally vacuum it up and throw it away, and you'd never even realize unless you heard your vacuum cleaner choke on the way over it. So it's just, I think having it on your phone makes it easily accessible to a ton of different people. And I think that's honestly, in terms of best practice, the absolute best route that they can go for.
Right. And, most people use like Microsoft products, right? So for example, in our company, they'll just use Microsoft Authenticator, right? And I know it's not always the best, but it's out of the box. Most companies use Office 365, for example. It comes with it. So you log in with your password, you got to approve it on your phone or put your, Face ID to open it and then approve it physically to do it, push notification, to do that. So that's, sometimes it's out of the box that companies offer to you right there as part of your deal. So you don't have to spend too much money too. So, it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. I think on the YubiKey, it's like I feel like there's just a lot of technology out there, especially in the security space, that are really cool, like Instagrammable material that, practically speaking, for most organizations, like, are totally not practical. Like you guys said, you can use MFA with your phone, and users, like your everyday users, they'll have the phone. Mailing them a YubiKey is, to everybody, you're gonna have a lot of, I feel like, logistical problems trying to, make, people are gonna, like you guys said, they're gonna lose the YubiKey. You're gonna have to find a way to replace that and not have them completely locked out of work. and it'd be like a complete work stoppage. On the topic of using their cell phones for MFA, especially the personal cell phones, what are you guys' thoughts on BYOD?
So in IM, it's a struggle, right? Because when you bring your own device, right? There are a couple. For example, some companies they'll want to have access to your phone, right? So they'll use a MDM or a mobile device manager, right? And they'll say, hey, if you want to access my email, you got to download the certificate on your phone. Guess what? That gives you access to. The company gives access to your phone now. So if for some odd reason they believe you might have breach or a hack, they can take your phone and they can wipe it, right? And you lose your contacts, everything. If they might even take your phone for a couple weeks, you're screwed. So when it comes to that, for me, I ask companies, do you want me to access your email? Guess what? You send me a phone, and then I'll keep them separate, right? But from an IAM, it's a struggle for us to really monitor that. Like when we have contractors, right, or your business to consumer or business to business from IAM, right, is these aren't really my employees, but how do I manage them, right? When should you tell me if, I'll give you an example, if like Amazon, right? If I'm Amazon and UPS, FedEx, whatever, right? They need access to, let's say, get my shipping information when I ship something, right? How do I limit that access to that people? How do I manage the people that access it? And they're not my HR people, so should I manage them, or should I have UPS or whatever send me the information, or have a standard policy saying if somebody gets terminated or leaves, you tell them that so I can shut down their account, right? So always been this big struggle when it comes to bring your own devices in terms of how do I manage the people, the devices. Do I give contractors their own laptop? That costs money, right? But I can lock it down, from there. So it's always been hard in terms of that, in terms of, how do I manage that from a IAM arena with security to say, how do I give contractors or, other people who want to bring their phone and not, again, say, guess what? We didn't tell you this, but when you have access to our email from your phone, we can take it anytime we want. So that's been a struggle with that too, in my opinion.
Well, I was going to say, I actually was tasked with doing some research in regards to BYOD policies not that long ago, actually. And they're better than they used to be, but they're still not great. And like Raven said in the chat, Intune offers segregated accounts with Android, so you can actually containerize your stuff. And what's really neat about it is that you can actually, like on your homepage, it'll have like a little section where it's just completely like even like a different color on your main screen of your phone. And those are all your work apps. And when you go to click on one to access like email or whatever, you have to log in. It asks for credentials before you can even access the stuff on that app. Great. And again, like you were saying before, if somebody suspects like, oh, if you happen to get fired from the company or termed for whatever reason, they remotely wipe your device. The neat thing about it is that it only wipes the work profile from there. So you're not having to lose contacts or personal photos or anything. I know when I was reading up on Apple was a little bit weirder about that. There were certain apps that you could have a work and personal profile attached to them, but some of them it was just one or the other. So that could, depending on what apps you use for work, could be a little sticky there. But it's one of those things. Like again, it is getting better, but they still need to work on it. There were a couple things that even I had realized after doing the research where I was like, from a security standpoint, this isn't great. Like this, I don't personally trust this. And I even told the company I work for when we were looking into this, I said, if we're going to do something in regards to this, I would limit it to Android devices, which sucks, but it's just Apple's implementation of it just wasn't to where I think it should be, and it sucks because we use both Apple and Android, for work. So, but yeah, I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with MDM stuff, so I really appreciate the Raven, educating me on that one. I think that's awesome because I didn't know that you could do it, right? So that's cool too. And I think that comes back to InfoSec, right? Is yeah, I've been doing this for 8 years, but I'm still learning something new every day, right? So I think that's the cool thing about our industry is you're always learning, right? I had no idea, so I appreciate that too. So now I can understand that better because I don't use a lot of MDM stuff in terms of what I do, but I've always loved to know how that helps everybody out. So I really appreciate that, Raven, about how Intune can separate work to email, which makes life easier. Maybe I'll tell my old company that they should implement it that way, but that's cool. Thank you so much for that.
He's a good guy.
He
might
so
get a lot of
he,
crap, but he's a good guy.
he put up a comment earlier. Actually, let me just scroll up and get it again. Mate, you haven't had tofu? Is this true?
I can neither confirm nor deny this. We had a chat. Oh, so we, just not to go super off topic with this, but we did have a conversation because another user in the Republic of Hackers Discord that I co-admin, we were talking about tofu, and I was like, I've never had it because I eat majority of just chicken and pork and sometimes steak. And then I've gotten, you can see, the trolling continues on other platforms. It's just, man.
Honestly, I'm not even like a big tofu guy myself because, again, I'm also mostly chicken and then more chicken. Actually, I'm like almost exclusively chicken at this point. It's kind of aggressive. I really need to add some variety to my life. But yeah. I wanted to address the elephant in the room. I know there were several other people that probably read that and were concerned. and I wanted to get ahead of this before the controversy got elevated.
He's already sent me a link of like a local place that's supposed to have like some really good tofu. So I'm assuming sometime this week I'm going to give like a full-blown report / review of like what I thought of it and what the dish was that I had, and other details.
I don't think that this is my last time that I ate tofu, but if it is, that's frightening. I can't think of another time that I've eaten tofu since. It was 2017. It was in Qingdao in China, and they have a local dish called stinky tofu. It's exactly that. It is disgusting, but like people put it down, and like I had like I don't know. They had like these like sausages that were so good, and I was trying to get as much of that as I could. And they're like, here, have some stinky tofu. And I'm like, oh, that's what I've been smelling. And it just, I wasn't really prepared for it at the time. And I haven't had tofu since, which is not fantastic.
Dude, I'm from Laos, man. Trust me, we have some things my mom saves, I guess is the right word, it's like fermented something, and like they from everything. And I'm like, Mom, I was born in America. Don't get me wrong. I love Lao food, but some of the things I'm like, I can't do it. Just can't do it.
It can be kind of intense if you're not ready for it,
My question is, why would anybody eat anything that has the word stinky in the name? Like, here, try this stinky fried rice. Like, no, why would no?
Yeah, it was a good time, but yeah, stinky tofu, heck of a thing. We're coming up here on 5 minutes here till we need to bounce. As you guys know, Chiefs, I have to be there, or if it's all gonna fall apart. It really is. If Chiefs lose and it's over.
Do you have like a pregame ritual that you do? Like if you don't do it, there's like some bad voodoo that happens.
Pray.
It's called drinking a lot. That's probably what's called.
A little bit of crying, some shaking in the corner. And I've gotten away from that because of Pat Mahomes. And of course, look at what's going on now. So got to get after it.
Listen, I mean, so Madden put him on 2 of the the Madden covers. The curse was bound to catch up to him eventually.
I could go, if I were to make a second YouTube channel, it would be on the Chiefs. I feel like I could go so long just talking about all the problems. I know, Andrew, you could go on about the Seahawks. It's just, football is such a fantastic and frustrating and complex sport that it's never just one issue. And last week it was all of them. And I don't know, but anyway, but before we close up, Andrew, dude, thank you for coming on. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I've learned so much about IAM, about bring your own device. I feel like we definitely need to do this again at some point. If you could give, one single IAM bit of advice to someone that is not in cybersecurity, what would it be?
I think it's just well, let me do it in general, right? Is ask a lot of questions, because I think that's where you can get some better ideas of what's going on. And then if from an IAM, if you want to, from a person non-technical or come into this space, be like, hey, so how do we authenticate? How do I log into that? What do we use? Right? I think those are at least you can understand it, because most time you get using a password and you're like, that's it. And I think that's a good way for you to at least get started, because that's part of it, right? Is a lot of organizations using a password is sadly key, where I know we're all trying to go to passwordless, So I think from a beginner standpoint is ask your company, hey, or when you log into your computer, how do I log into my computer? Do I put in a PIN number? Do I, put a password in? Do I put my finger in? Do I use my face? Whatever, and say, interesting. What are some other ways that I can log in? Right. I think that'll be a nice start for most people to understand how IAM works, because your identity, you're authenticating yourself, you're proving who you are, and what you know.
Yeah, for sure. Make, do you have anything?
And I think it's something that, we definitely try to do even outside of the Republic of Hackers server, is we're trying to, and I like, because both you guys seem to be doing this really well as well, is just explaining things to people that are cybersecurity related topics in a more digestible manner. I think a lot of people, they think of cybersecurity and they're just like, whoa, technical acronyms, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it can be, but if you have people that understand that field and they're willing to take the time out of their day to explain to you some of these topics, but put it in a way that even you're going to be able to understand, that's fantastic. I mean, I always think of it as there used to be a church that I went to, and I'm not trying to turn this into like a religious podcast or anything, but it was a Catholic church, and my parents were very, religious for the most part. And every Sunday we would go, they would take multiple things out of the Bible and they would never explain it to you. And I'd always leave there and I'm like, well, I didn't feel like I learned anything. I didn't feel like I grasped any of the concepts that you talked about. But then I changed up and I went to a different church and they would explain one concept out of the Bible and they would spend the entire rest of the hour putting it into terms that you're going to be able to, one, understand, but then also being able to apply it to your everyday life now. And I always would walk out of there, I'm like, man, I learned so much. I felt like it was just so much more of a learning experience. And that's what we need to do, is we need to take simple concepts, not grab a bunch of them and try to explain them to people, because you're not going to be able to do that. Grab like one, like passwords, or grab, something like, being like not clicking on phishing emails, and just make that like one of the main things that you just talk about for even on Twitter or whatever for a couple weeks, or explain to your family members that aren't as into this as you are, and put it to them in terms that they're going to be able to understand, and, not obviously not drown them out or anything, or bore them, but just continually bring it up to them and just let them know, like, this is important, like, you might not be somebody that somebody would want to go after and hack, but you might be. And then you are going to be one of those people that are like, oh, I just had my social security card, or my credit card information stolen, and they racked up like $7,000 in in the course of an hour. So it's like, it's just being able to explain things to people so that they can understand them.
Yeah, I think you guys are both just so on it, and I think it's just absolutely awesome, to have more people, in this space creating content and guiding people through. Andrew, you're absolutely crushing it with the channel. Mate, you're obviously crushing it with Discord, and it is like you said. I mean, even just the title, cybersecurity, like that sounds kind of like complicated and intimidating. And so, and even like IAM, like whenever you're starting off with an acronym, it's like, whoa, you're already kind of like starting off putting people kind of on their heel, and you're trying to pull them back, and let them know it's really not that complicated. But you're totally right. It really comes down to just communication and really speaking in terms that the user can understand and apply it. Kind of as you said, it doesn't really matter that you know something if it's totally not actionable. Making these things actionable, making it daily habits, and just things that you're able to fall back on. Super important. So, with all that, before we jump, Andrew, do you have any either closing things to hit on? And plus, do you think that the Seahawks have any chance of making the wild card?
No, none. And the sad part of it all is we gave up our draft pick to the Jets. So even when we tank, this year, Jets have our draft pick thanks to Jamal Adams. So just to answer that real quick, no. Sadly, I don't think so. With the Rams getting Von Miller, oh God, I'm just scared of that defense. But in terms of IAM, if you have friends who want to come to IAM, again, I'm trying to get content out there. I am a family man. I have 2 nice boys, so I'm trying to do as much content as I can. But send them to the video and say, hey, look, does this interest you? Right? This is, maybe you like this, right? Maybe it's something cool. And I think that's the whole point of my channel, right? Is to teach people simply something. Do you want to do? Try it out. You'd be surprised because again, you don't have to really be so technical and know coding. You just got to understand how to talk to somebody, understand framework, understand what their problem is, right? And what are some possible solutions that you can get to. And the best part of it all, the content is free. There's no, you don't have to go, and go to a boot camp to learn IAM or go to, get this certification or get that. You don't need to do an IAM. There's so much free content out there. ID Pro is one that I know we're time. I'm a member of ID Pro. They are a new organization. They are great at posting out content. They have a body of knowledge that's free actually on the website. Studio, I can send you a link to that. You can put it on the show notes if you want to. All free. I mean, it's so great. There's some podcasts out there that talk about IAM too. So I think that's something where you don't have to, go about what's the first certification I get. You don't need to do certification to do IAM. It's nice to have, but you don't have to do that either, right? And then the last thing, is I always say this at the end of my videos. I think it sounds stupid sometimes, but it's just stay curious, right? Because you never know. Because it's true. Like I was curious about IAM, cybersecurity, and all that good stuff, and then it brought me where I am today, right? So I think that's where I want people to understand is, ask the right questions, be vulnerable, ask, because you never know that it might interest you, and then boom, you're going to do awesome in whatever career in InfoSec, I
was going to say too, real quick. So, I mean, do you mind if people reach out to you via Twitter if they have any questions?
I would love it. I love talking to people. It's fun for me. So please, you can DM me on Twitter. I would love to talk to you. You want to, send a comment on my videos, that's fine too. Again, I love talking to people. It's fun for me. I used to coach lacrosse for 8 years, so the coaching in me comes out. So I love to talk to people and help them in their journey any way that I can. And again, all I care about for people is they get it, they try something new, and it brings a smile to their face. It makes me happy. So please, by all means, hit me up anytime. I'd be more happy to talk to anybody and to whatever help out that I can. I will do that for you because again, it just makes me happy to help people because that's what everybody should do, right?
Prepare for Eric Bellardo to be in those DMs about broke Arback Mountain and all the
I can talk Arback all day long. How much it's a struggle at times too. So Arback's not always the right solution. It depends on your customer. So trust me, anytime.
Spicy DMs. Spicy DMs. All right. Well, with that, Andrew, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This has been awesome. And then Make. Also, again, thank you as well.
Anytime, brother.
Everybody, you can follow Andrew. We got the handles down below on Twitter. And then for both myself and Makeshift, these are our handles. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close it up. Thank you again, everybody, for jumping on. I really appreciate it. We will be back next week. So definitely set that reminder, 7 Eastern, and follow along on Twitter for updates. So with that, we will see you next time.